Welcome to the Riveo Impact Lab, the podcast in which we explore what it means for small businesses to have real impact in an evolving world. On this podcast, we engage our curiosity around topics like sustainability, diversity and inclusion, and the ethical outcomes of our decisions, all from a small business perspective.
You can find our podcast on audio platforms like Spotify or Apple Podcasts, or if you prefer the video version, we're on YouTube, and you can also get to the video podcast through our website. I'm Elin.
And I'm Emily. Beth Bengtson is the founder and CEO of Working for Women, a nonprofit organization designed to create business opportunities for women in underrepresented communities. Beth has over 20 years of experience as a leader in marketing and communications, as well as corporate social responsibility. Beth's unique ability to bring purpose to the professional has culminated in her Working for Women model, which connects business members to nonprofits that focus on creating employment opportunities for underserved women so that the business members can contribute both money and skill sets.
So I got to talk to Beth for this podcast. I got to interview her, and I really enjoyed hearing her story coming from this very corporate background, very, for-profit, profit-driven background. Even though she was working in the ESG space, she still had that to contend with, and she evolved her career into this nonprofit that she founded. It is Working for Women. It is all about helping women. So she, went from her background in corporate America into a place where she's leading with her values. She's changing things in a very meaningful way for women all over the country. And I just found that really inspiring.
Yeah, Beth is a very inspiring person, and I really enjoyed listening to the conversation that you had with her. Beth is doing incredible and meaningful work, and she has been for years. And so we know you'll take so much out of this conversation with her. So let's go ahead and get into it.
Hey, Beth, welcome to the Riveo Impact Lab.
Hey, I'm so glad to be here. This is going to be fun today. So
yeah, I'm excited to talk to you. It is we're both in different parts of New York State right now, and yes, very gloomy day, but we're going to bring the sunshine.
Yes. We're going to bring the lights out. It was funny. I was out kayaking this morning on the river. I go out early in the morning. And it was one of those days that you just had to be reminded that sometimes you just have to wait for the light to come out. So it was a cloudy start, but the light was still there behind the clouds.
That just made me think of like a Leonard Cohen song.
Hey, you didn't say we had to sing on this.
No, there's no singing. Absolutely no singing. No, we're here to talk about impact and purpose, and this podcast is for small business owners who are looking to make more of an impact and wondering how they can leave a legacy that they're really proud of. And it's a topic that interests us because we're on that path. And you and I met, a few years ago at a conference, and I learned about what you were doing, found it fascinating. So I'm glad we're finally getting to have this conversation.
I am too. So where do you want to begin?
Well, I'm curious about what really sparked your passion for purpose-driven business, and because you made a shift, you made a conscious shift, and I don't know if I don't know this story, so I'm kind of curious what led to that and to this current direction that you're on.
So, my whole career has been a journey, I think, as many of ours have been, in terms of thinking about like direction. When I started my, coming out of college and with a business degree, I don't know, there was no conversation necessarily about purpose-driven business. And I found myself early in my career, I worked in the financial services industry to start off with. And always looking for, and I was working down on Wall Street at the time in the 90s, so at the time where, purpose was not necessarily part of the conversation at all when you're thinking about finances and thinking about, evaluating companies. And always looking for that piece of how can we be using money in a way that is actually making society better. And I started thinking a lot about how could I take my business skills and use them as a force for good, right? Like how could business be that force for good? And I didn't, and not wanting to have to wait, I came into the workforce in the place where it was you earn as much money as you can as fast as you can so that you can retire and go off and do good. And I think I always questioned that from the start. Like, why do I have to wait to do good until I retire? Isn't there a way of actually using my skills and using business to be a force for good?
That's interesting. And really, in the 90s on Wall Street, were there a lot of women? I'm picturing the powers, the shoulder pad power suits.
I had the shoulder pads and the power suits. I totally can admit to that.
Yeah.
It was an interesting time to come into working on Wall Street too, because that's when affirmative action was really in full play. And I will argue that part of why I got the opportunity that I did was they were looking to meet numbers, right? And so it's really great. I don't know if everybody can see what we look like, but to be tall and blonde makes it a lot easier to get into the workforce at that time, right? In terms of meeting quotas, and bringing more women in met those quotas in that time place. So in a great way, it opened up doors and opportunities for me that I don't think I would have had access to otherwise. On the other side, it also made me question why I had access to those opportunities. So I think that it was already planting a seed in my psyche about the role of business, and again, how we could be using it for good. It doesn't necessarily have to be for bad.
Yeah. Or maybe not even bad, but just like personal gain.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which sometimes involves bad.
Yeah. Well, but it doesn't have to, but it was also the point. The point of all of that time period was also starting to become the real emergence of the corporate social responsibility piece. Of really starting to think about, not that it hadn't been there, but and the irony of it is, there was a lot of focus then on environmental, social, and governance, and then the movement went through many iterations and ended up back at environmental, social, and governance. But in any of its iterations, it's been a place of people thinking about what is that social impact, right? Like, what is the social impact of the company? And I think what we've just seen, though, is more and more focus on that over time, because I think people just started questioning, right? Like, it's not enough. We had 50 plus years of Milton Friedman thinking of it's all about profit, and then people kind of saying, well, what about all the other stakeholder groups that are involved in that? So,
right, yeah, and I think that once that seed is planted, it doesn't go away, despite the best efforts of certain people trying to squash it. It's just the ideas are out there, and there's a whole lot of people that care about having some kind of social cause attached to their company.
And at the end of the day, it's the evolution of business, right? Because it's about differentiation. When I was teaching this and I would go into companies, and especially small businesses, I would talk about purpose being that product differentiation piece, because if all things are consistent. So I would talk sometimes either about sneakers or pasta, and I'd say, when you go into the store and all other things, at a certain point in the life cycle of anything, the function and the price all become almost the same, right? The box of pasta on the shelf, there's 5 different types of pasta. They all, roughly are the same type of thing. The price place in there is almost exactly the same. So then it becomes, well, why wouldn't I choose the pasta that saves the world, right? Like, in terms of thinking about that product differentiation. And I think that's what you have more so now, but it only comes into being when everything else is in alignment, if that makes sense.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
So for you, I'm sure you have a lot of causes that you care about, and you've decided to focus on women and helping women. How did you get there? Was there a moment that helped you make that decision, or what led you down that road?
So I think there were multiple moments. One being, where we started with where my career was, where there wasn't many women, and just being cognizant of that. over time, and then finding as I came into more leadership roles that I was always mentoring women in organizations and helping them find their voice and self-confidence to be able to kind of be in the roles that they were and evolve moving forward and go on that career trajectory. And then I actually had a pivotal moment, probably about, I guess it would be about 10 years ago now, that I ended up on a service trip with a friend, and we ended up in Guatemala, and I got to see women that were basically, well, it was the prostitutes in Guatemala City. And when we went around to visit them, I realized that they were all running businesses, right? While it was the sex trade, because of the way that it works in Guatemala, it's very much on an individual basis, and that they all had business skills. And I thought, what if we could help women really see the skills that they have and apply them and put them into better pathways, right, for building those skills. And out of that is kind of the beginnings of, the seed was already there along those lines, and being passionate about, corporate social responsibility. I brought that into multiple firms, but that piece really brought it over to, if we're going to focus our efforts, let's help elevate more women in the workforce and help support them along those lines. Because there's not, and especially in the United States, there is not a lot of focus around women and economics and their trajectory.
Not yet.
Yes. we're building that motion, right? So.
Yeah, I hope we are. Yeah. I mean, you know more than.
And then, yeah. You know what? You have to stay committed. So, regardless of, and I think if anything, even with where we are right now, it's even more important, right? Like I have a real responsibility to use my voice to help elevate others as we continue on this journey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as do we all, I think, on some level. So you mentioned Guatemala, you also studied in Paris. Mm-hmm. Do you think that international education and your global experiences did help shape your perspective on gender equity and social impact? And, how so? What were you observing?
So I would say it wasn't even, the educational experience. It's been all the travel that I've done. I think travel and education are never wasted dollars in any way. And the more that you get exposed to other environments and other ways in which people live, I think without a doubt shapes what you do, especially when you see the different economics across the world. It can't not, I would believe it can't not shape you if you're open along those lines. So I always feel like you need to get out of where you are to see what else exists out there, both from a positive and a negative standpoint. But 100%, my travel, especially in the undeveloped world and the developing world, has totally shaped my approach to business and thinking about the role that business plays in society. And, business generates capital. The question becomes, how do you use that capital? And where do you use that capital?
Yeah. And one thing I find interesting is when you think about helping women and you put it in a global perspective, it feels so overwhelming. And yet, here we are, each trying to do our bit to make more of an impact. And one of the ways you're doing that is through your company, now your nonprofit that you founded, Working for Women. Can you tell us the origin story of that and talk a little bit about the mission of that organization?
Yeah. So let me talk about the mission first. So Working for Women exists to help elevate all women in the workforce, right? Because, and especially those from marginalized communities across the United States. We are U.S. focused. While we just talked about my global experience, and while the need is there globally, when we started Working for Women, it was really looking at the United States and seeing, realizing that, we are not on an even economic playing field, not only just from women overall, but, women are in 50% of the women that are working in jobs that are below the federal poverty wage. And so we need to be focusing on that. But we see more women than ever in the workforce, but the economics of that, of more women in the workforce, does not mean that it's economically viable or in a way that a lot of women can support their families. So that's the first point in kind of with working for women and where the focus is. And that was where the board, as we got this up and going. And what Working for Women does is it's a business giving community. And what I mean by that is it's a collective of businesses and professionals that all come together, and we aggregate their time, skills, and money to then move into our network where we provide programming across other nonprofits across the United States that reach women in those communities that are working to advance in the workforce. And we do three things. We invest in connecting them to pathways, better pathways on their job journey that will allow them to achieve economic mobility, ideally. We support them with skills and training so they become part of what we call the Working for Women Circle, which is a whole range of programming support, from things like negotiation skills training to financial support groups that help support them on that career journey. Because my other big learning since starting Working for Women is the fact that I thought we just had to put women into better jobs and that would change the paradigm, but we can't just do that. It's about building that support system around it. And then the third area where we focus is on changing the conversation around barriers for women in the workforce. And that's our much larger work that really reaches across our investor community, because we think very much, we don't think about ourselves as a charitable organization. While we are registered that way, we think about ourselves from the standpoint of, from us having a fiduciary responsibility to really make sure that the dollars that are donated into us really have that meaningful impact. So that advocacy work is really about raising the awareness of things like childcare, really using the voice of our organization to raise up more of the barriers that are holding women back in the workforce. So that was a lot. I don't know that I got to all your questions, because that was kind of really the background on Working for Women. I think your other question was the fact of where did the genesis come from? And the genesis came from the emergence of both my thinking about the role of business as a force for social good, and then the intersection of my always seeing that we needed to do more to help support women in the workforce.
Yeah, we sure do. I have another project. We're working on a documentary about women and money, and so have been hyper-focused on the disparity there historically and currently, where women just don't have the same, we haven't been on a level playing field for so long, and we're trying to catch up, and then there's all these societal taboos, when it comes to talking about money, learning about money. If you act a certain way or ask certain questions, you're characterized, negatively a lot of times. And there's just a lot to unpack with that topic, a lot of work to be done. So, kudos for all that you're doing.
Yeah, you and I need to have, as you talk about that, I realize that you and I need to have a separate conversation from this, and
yes, I would
through
love
some
that.
of the work that we're doing along that, because that's become a big focus. When I started Working for Women, we weren't necessarily thinking about that financial literacy piece. It was really about that connection to jobs. And we've launched a program called Money Talks this year that is it's so much more than financial literacy. It's a 6-month program, which is where we bring women in through a cohort model to really unpack and talk about money, right? And talk about the role of money in their lives, but really bring that foundational support and start changing that conversation. And in all the work that we've done, as soon as you put the term money up in front and try to bring women to it, nobody shows. So there's so much work to be done here. But what I'm so excited about with the Money Talks program is, while we've been on a road to help women, gain financial independence through the workforce, the Money Talks program, we're going to be changing lives because we're going to be enabling women to generate wealth. And that becomes a game changer, right, as we go forward. Because, as we're able to put women into jobs, support them on that job pathway so they can get to that financial independence, Then we move them into a place where they can actually, where we're actually talking about wealth generation and putting foundations in. That's going to change the conversation.
That sounds really exciting. I would love to hear more about that.
We will have a separate one, especially if you're looking at that documentary.
Okay, so we're back. For those people who are watching this on YouTube or on our website, we just had a little technical hiccup, and and Beth is on a different camera. You look equally fabulous, but a new setup. It's like doing a wardrobe change in the middle of a concert. It's amazing.
I feel like you get to see a whole different part of my office. You see my different my different setups and backgrounds. So
yeah, no, awesome.
Anyway,
So
we just thought we'd bring some more variety into the interview.
we're talking about working for women and choosing how you identify and choose the nonprofit partners you're working with. You said that they generally come to you?
So they come to us through all recommendations. You know, here's the stark fact. In the United States, less than 2% of all philanthropic dollars goes to women and girls. The majority of those dollars goes to the health and reproductive conversation. Not exactly shocking. There's not a lot of dollars that goes to helping women from an economic standpoint of really kind of from that workforce development. So the majority of the nonprofits that we work with are all grassroots and regional, looked across the United States. There's not like there's a national, we are the national nonprofit that is really kind of aggregating and thinking about this. So how we find our partners is a lot through word of mouth, through recommendations in those areas from some of the women's funds, the funding network, you know, saying who's working on workforce. And, you know, what do you think? And that way we also get that place of evaluation because they've also been working with them or putting grants in and seeing the success. What's amazing is there's so many great groups, you know, across the country that are doing this work, but awareness is so low because they don't have the time or the dollars to really focus on that key piece, right? Or working with firms like yours, Elin, to really raise awareness and be able to have that marketing and communication dollars to really kind of bring those stories. So that's the other piece that we're able to do, kind of as that larger organization that sits over it, is raise awareness and help them, those stories and those case studies. Because at the end of the day, working for women really exists not only to help the women, but to expand the capacity of resources that are going in here to support women across the United States. So to grow that capacity.
Yeah, that's great. And you're right that storytelling piece, the amplification is so important. Like that's something that's part of our mission is to tell those impact stories and help get the word out there. And we're working on innovative ways to try to do that so it's not burdensome to the nonprofits. But it's a challenge. It's something that the infrastructure for that doesn't automatically just exist. So that's another conversation we can have offline, Beth.
Yeah, the infrastructure doesn't exist. And the other side, it was interesting, we've had people come in recently, is the aptitude of the people that are investing or making charitable dollars. They don't want to see dollars going into that area too. So it also burden is on the nonprofit of, you know, if you can't tell your story and you can't bring more people in, you can't grow your capacity, just like any business, right? It's the same. No business is growing without awareness and people understanding, and you make that investment. But in the nonprofit world, it's viewed negatively. Like that is the biggest opportunity, but it is also when funders come in, you know, they want to look and see all your dollars are going to programming. Well, that's great. And yes, you know, the majority of those dollars go to programming. But if you're not able to bring more people in, you're kind of stuck, right? Because you can't grow that capacity to be able to do more. So I think there's the systems and the awareness in terms of the nonprofits and being able to bring it, but there also needs to be more understanding on those that are donating dollars, that their dollars are going to go a lot further if you're able to expand the reach of that organization and its work. So.
Yeah, that's an awareness campaign in and of itself, but that's where a lot of our interest lies. So thank you for bringing that up. But I want to dial it back a little bit, and I'm wondering if you can think of a story. I'm sure you can think of many stories, but if you can just illustrate some way that working for women has impacted a real life woman and made her life better. Is there a story that comes to mind that you'd like to share?
Yeah, there's a couple stories, and it's interesting. We're just working on our mid-year letter and talking about it. And what has happened with working for women, and I'm going to talk about it kind of generally with women that come in, is they'll come into one area of our programming, and so it could be a connection to the job program, the certification program, and it was something that we didn't necessarily know about in the beginning. And what has come back over the last few years as we've more programming on and reach along those lines is the community piece that is so lacking, especially for women on the lower end of the economic journey, right? A place where they can be seen for their aspirations and maybe not the traumas of where they've come from. And so when women come into the Working for Women community, and this is the feedback that we get consistently again and again, is the place of being seen and being supported for the dreams and where they're trying to go, right? And that it's a surround, like they also are connecting with other women. So many of us have professional groups that, when you're on your journey that you've connected into. When I walk in and when we're doing more stuff in person and even when we come on virtually, when you ask these women, who's there for them, they haven't had that experience. They haven't had that experience of community. And I think that's one of our strongest pieces as we continue to grow, and is that the women, when they come in and have one experience, come back and sign up for all our programming. So in terms of that story, what we're seeing now is we'll have a woman come in for the negotiation skills workshop, then they come back, they do the certification program, now they're doing the financial support groups, and they're feeling that not only that sense of community of being in community with other women, because everything we're doing is a cohort model, but they're also feeling seen and supported on their career journey as they go forward. And lastly, the other piece that I'll say that, you sometimes underestimate the power of just being there and seeing and being present with women. I think anybody, right? And I think we can think about this along those lines. When we start a session, when I've started sessions at Working for Women, I will walk into the group and say, we're here to invest in you. And that moment is a pivotal moment, right? You see all of a sudden, because so often women are not used to anybody saying, hey, we're the caregivers, we're going off and taking care of everybody else. And to walk into a room and all of a sudden hear that this whole session is there for them and that we're here to support them, it changes the energy like nothing else, right? Like you just see that burst of all of a sudden everybody sits a little taller and is more awareness, and those kind of like, and unfortunately it's not the experience that they have all the time, right? I think possibly overall, as most women, it's not an experience that we have of sitting there and having someone say, I'm here to invest in you today.
And it's so important. I love that was your answer, and that this is being experienced by these women. I think too, a lot of times people underestimate the value of that virtual community. They think of community in terms of going down to the community center in your actual community. But like for myself, I have worked so hard to build online communities, and like I feel like those are my people, and they're not necessarily in my backyard, but it doesn't matter. And this is a new phenomenon, relatively new phenomenon, and it's real and it's powerful, and it's really awesome that you're tapping into that.
Yeah, and like I said, if you'd asked me 7 years ago, I don't think community would have been in what we were doing. I was like, we're going to build resources. We're, very business mindset. I'm going to take the power of the business community, aggregate what business does really well, which is generate capital, and move more capital over to those nonprofits that are spending way too much time fundraising, and let them do more of their really do the social work, right? And support them on that journey. And so community, I wasn't thinking about that. And it's emerged because we spend so much time listening, and we were hearing from the women where we were bringing the programming in, and the group and the organizations that we're supporting. They came back and told us that was such a big component of that experience of being seen. So we now have women that have been with us for multiple years, right? And they feel that that we're there for them, right? And nothing, we all know, we've all had that power of there's been somebody there that has seen us and helped us on those days. And that to me has been amazing to watch that come out of this. And we didn't go into it intentionally, right? It's emerging organically, and it's meeting a need that we didn't realize was there.
Yeah, you're doing important work, that's for sure.
Thank you.
And so bringing this back to our audience, small business, you have said that business can and should be a force for good, which I also definitely believe, a force for social good.
Yeah.
What do you think that looks like in practice, especially for small businesses? So these, probably are for-profit businesses that they don't exist exclusively like you do, as a nonprofit, but how can they incorporate that becoming a force for social good into their business model?
So this is a place I always love to talk because, before I came into working for women, I built and ran for-profit businesses. Mm-hmm. You just have to bake it in, right? It's not as hard as everybody thinks it is, and I would also argue most women-owned businesses are value-driven along those lines, and already it's somewhat there. You put it in your bottom line. You just make the commitment. You just say, that this is part of what we do. We give back a percentage each year, and here's where we're giving that to, and you build it into your budget. And, I listened to this from so many businesses that say, and even when I was running my for-profit business before, people would be like, well, it's so amazing what you're doing. I can't wait till I can do that. This is why Working for Women exists. Like, you could be giving $10, you could be giving $100, you could be giving $1,000, you could be giving $10,000. We have people at all different levels and businesses at all different levels. You just get started. You just write the first check. You just make the first donation. You don't have to wait till you're big enough or anything, because the power of the giving circle model means your $100 can be part of $100,000, $1 million, because the more we have more businesses come together, the more we can aggregate those resources and move it out. So, we always talk about the power of if 1,000 businesses give $1,000, that's $1 million. Like, just do it, So if you as a business can't give $1,000, then give $100, whatever it is, but give it into a place where that collective giving model is, because that's where the power of the aggregation comes.
It sounds so easy. It is easy.
It is easy.
It is easy. It's just making a decision to do it.
I've listened. I send, and sorry, this is like a area of, I guess, of pain, right, of coming from the business thing, because I've spent so many presentations where people come up to me afterwards in small businesses and they say, when I get big enough. And you don't have, that's the wrong place, because then you're waiting. You don't need to be big enough. You just need to say, this is part of my business. And it doesn't matter how much you're giving. It matters that you're giving and that you're incorporating it into your business. You don't have to, there's no point in your business growth model that's the right time to turn this on.
Mm. Is there a link between social impact and business success?
I would argue yes, just from what I've seen in my experience. But I will also tell you there's research out there that shows, right? The firms that have this, especially in times of economic, hardship, they do better overall, because whether you're a solo entrepreneur, right, and you're pulling it along those lines and you feel better and you know that you can support, to growing your business, there's no downside to people feeling like they're part of something bigger, right? And really feeling like that not only are they going to work to support themselves, but that the place that they're working at is working to make the world a better place. That deepens the commitment. I've seen it again and again of employees to the organizations and the companies that they work with. because it ties you back to being part of something bigger than yourself. There's no downside to that. And those firms have more committed and more loyal employees. And that's the piece, I think, on a larger standpoint, that business just doesn't, like, it keeps, we had 50 years of it's just about the dollars, right? And so I think in the world now, people are starting to see it's not just about the dollars. We need to bring those other pieces in if we're going to have a strong and committed workforce. But also have drink my Kool-Aid.
What does, we ask all of our guests this question, what does impact mean to you? We like talking about impact.
I know, it's such a term that is out there. In so many levels, and we put out an impact report every year, and we have so many conversations about it, because then what we define as impact, someone will define as outputs, and there's so many definitions of impact. For me, I think it really comes down to, and it's not a quantitative thing, it's a qualitative piece. It's the stories that are coming back in, it's the community, it's the lives that I know that we're touching. Because I know that impact will have that ripple effect, right? If we're affecting one life, that life is in turn going to ripple and affect it out. And I think the hardest part in the work that I do is navigating that piece between the data, the quantitative and the qualitative, right? Of showing that, and then being able to really, demonstrate that everybody wants it in a hard, fast place, when so much of it is you're changing lives because of the conversations you're having, and because of what we were even talking about before, the feedback that we get, that people are so engaged in our community that we didn't even know we were building necessarily.
Right. So insightful. It's so inspiring talking to you. I could continue this conversation for the next hour, but we're not going to do that. Instead, I would love to have you share how people can get involved with Working for Women, how they can find you, support you, all the things.
No problem. So we're pretty easy. We've been talking the name Working for Women. It's workingforwomen.org. You can just get on and find us. We are active on LinkedIn and Instagram. Those are other great places to follow our content. Not that we don't have some in other areas, but those are our two primary areas, especially because we're really trying to reach that business community. So engage and follow us on LinkedIn. You'll learn a lot about what we're doing. Sign up for our email newsletter. As you got today, and we don't probably about once a month, just to kind of keep you up and on the works. And then, of course, contribute. I think that's most important. We take it in all shapes, forms. If you have a donor advised fund, we are a great place. We are listed on all of those. Great place to be able to help support, and just remember the power of the collective, right? Those dollars that you give to an organization like Working for Women go that much further because of that model of the aggregation. Mm. And thank you. Spread the word. Opportunities like this, if anybody wants to have us come on and talk, speak, I love talking about the work that we're doing. So that's how you change the world, right? Is more opportunities. So I really appreciate you making time to have this conversation on your podcast.
It was a pleasure, and really so inspiring to hear about what you're doing and how you are changing the world. So thank you very much, Beth, for being here with us on the Impact Lab, and I'm sure we'll be talking again soon. Thank you.
That's good.
Our Make an Impact tip of the week is decide to donate. You don't have to donate $1,000 to a nonprofit to make an impact, but we can all give something. Decide exactly what you're able to contribute to an organization in need and make your contribution by the end of the week. Then send us a message to tell us who you've chosen to support. We can't wait to hear about the amazing organizations that have captured your heart. Thanks for listening, and make sure to do good in the world this week. If you have questions you'd like us to address on the podcast, you can reach us at info@reveocreative.com. Subscribe wherever you listen so you don't miss out on any of our incredible upcoming guests, and we'll see you soon at the Riveo Impact Lab.